Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
On this Tuesday, December 6th, we welcome you to Real Talk. Jesperson in with John Hicks. In just a moment, we're going to be checking in with a cattleman and a conservationist, Lynch Staunton, about COP15, biodiversity conference, UN biodiversity conference coming up. Canada plays host. It's coming up just shortly, and we're going to be talking about environmental perspectives in Canada, priorities, where the country needs to go, how we're doing on conservation, and of course why this conversation is so important. On the heels of COP27, of course, we were talking about that. You know, on this show, we checked in several times to the UN Climate Change Conference in Egypt. This follow-up, treated separately, but the solutions to overcome these climate and environmental crises intertwined. We'll also take a look at the FTX crypto crisis. What a collapse, what a disaster that sent shockwaves through the entire cryptocurrency world, and has certainly influenced conversations as Sam Bankman-Fried, the CEO of that FTX crypto exchange, obviously now being analyzed. He says he's going to appear before Congress, but people are trying to figure this guy out, trying to figure this story out. How did this happen? Why did this happen? Chris Clearfield is going to join us. Chris, the Chief Executive Officer of Clearfield Group, and he's the author of a book called MELTDOWN. He takes a look at why systems fail, basically. He had a recent op-ed in the Globe and Mail, and he's going to talk to us about that. That's coming up in about a half hour's time. Across Canada, of course, it goes without saying that December 6th is a day that sticks in memory for horrific reasons. On 1989, a gunman in an anti-feminist mass shooting entered the mechanical engineering class at École Polytechnique in Montreal and claimed the lives of 14 women, separated the women from the men, and gunned down, using a Ruger semi-automatic rifle, gunned down 14 women, killing them, injuring 10 others as well. These were women who, you have to assume, for all intents and purposes, were excited, bullish, optimistic about their careers, their futures in STEM, but this gunman had other plans for them based on his mission, based on his hard wiring, based on the convictions that he had and how he felt about women in particular in the feminist movement. It's prompted conversations, memorials, some political action across the country in the years following, and this year is no different. Don't have to tell you, if you're a member of this audience, you're probably one that pays attention to politics, that the federal government is looking to pass Bill C-21. It'll be changes to Canada's gun laws. We've been touching down on this story, and we'll be continuing to look into this story in the days and the weeks to come, but we cannot ignore the significance of that gun debate and what it's doing to the culture or the climate of conversation across the country right now, including on this anniversary. Look no further to what we touched on the show yesterday. And if you missed my extended comments on that, I invite you to go back to our archives on YouTube or the podcast. And of course, you can listen to our December 5th show. We told you about the gun advocacy group, the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. You've heard their spokesperson. You've heard their president, Rod Giltaca, on this show before. They're essentially, although I asked him about this, they bristle at the comparison as Canada's NRA, but that's as close or as concise as a description as you can get. They're the lobby that represents gun owners, and they're perhaps the loudest critics, indeed the loudest critics, of the Liberals' proposed changes in C-21. Well, an advocacy group that operates in memory of the École Polytechnique shooting victims and their families, the survivors of that attack back in 1989, got into an online tussle, a Twitter tussle with the CCFR. And that's when, as we talked to you about yesterday, the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights released a promo code, POLY, for 10% off their pro-gun ownership merchandise on their website. Of course, that has ignited a firestorm. I mean, it's pissed people off, quite frankly, is what it's done. And yesterday I told you why I think it's such an insensitive and obtuse move. Sometimes, as I asserted yesterday, I don't feel like things need to be stated because they're so apparent and painfully obvious. But of course, then a talk show's not doing its job if there's no talking. And the responses to my comments yesterday have reiterated to me the importance of having this conversation. People jumping up and asking, well, why is it okay for this advocacy group out of Montreal to troll legal gun owners? As if that's an equivalent argument. Or what if the women in that classroom that day had been armed as well and able to defend themselves? Lunacy. What if the folks in the movie theater in Colorado several years ago had handguns too, right? Then they could have fired back. The gunman dressed like the Joker that came there to claim their lives. What could possibly go wrong if a wild and frenzied, adrenaline-fueled gunfight broke out in a movie theater? Of course, there are countless other examples of where that logical fallacy applies. Now, who's really stepped into one? Now, I guess, former Montreal Canadiens goaltender, Canadian hockey legend, and Indigenous hunter, Carey Price, who claims that he had no knowledge of the background around this story when he shared his support for and the promo code for the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, obviously igniting the ire of people across the country. Now, a spokesperson for the Montreal Canadiens has stated that Carey Price was actually unaware of the École Polytechnique shooting. This is a guy that played more than a decade as one of the greatest all-time Montreal Canadiens, and I choose those words carefully. The point is, Carey Price endeared himself to Habs fans for 13 seasons. And by divulging yesterday that he had no awareness of this shooting back in 1999, I think it's safe to say that many of his fans believe that either he's lying or that there's a major, major blind spot when it comes to Carey Price. Now, people are jumping to his defense and saying Carey Price is an Indigenous man. Carey Price has a family history of hunting. Carey Price has a cultural connection to hunting. And all of these are valid points to be sure. And one of the biggest fact-finding missions that we all need to be on as we evaluate gun laws in Canada, as we have this raging gun debate. Can I say it's unfortunate that we're having this amid the anniversary of this horrific mass shooting? I mean, you could successfully argue that it's more important in the context of a mass shooting than any other time to talk about gun laws in Canada. But of course, there are thousands, if not millions, of legal gun owners across the country that would probably prefer that these conversations and debates happen outside the context of such a heinous crime, such a massive national tragedy. Jillian, a good friend of this show, lived many years of her life in Montreal. She wrote into talk at ryanjesperson.com, says, you don't live in Montreal for over a decade and not know about the massacre at École Polytechnique. Like, it's not bad enough that Carey Price is positioning himself to be the next Theo Fleury. But now the Habs PR machine insults the intelligence of fans and Montrealers by trying to claim that Carey Price didn't know about the murder of these 14 women who were meant to become engineers. Like it doesn't get talked about in Montreal regularly. Like the Habs haven't had commemorations and events addressing violence against women. Jill says the really gross part is knowing that the Habs PR team probably cooked up this ridiculous excuse, safe in the knowledge that Price is white passing enough for it to work. His privilege will earn him the benefit of the doubt from just enough people. Or at least we presume that's the plan. Nobody wants an NRA-style gun lobby in Canada, says Jillian. You should be able to defend gun rights for those who need guns, like hunters and farmers, without belittling or mocking victims of gun violence. You know, a discount code? Poly? Really? You know, how low are these folks? Canadians are better than that. We're smarter than that. We should be able to see nuance and differentiate our gun legislation in intelligent ways, in ways that our crazy-ass neighbors to the south seem unable to do. And Carey Price going all "my country, my rights" is embarrassing. And somebody better be yanking hard on Carey's chain before he slips further down that dumb slope and becomes the next Yay. That from Jillian out of Montreal. You know, one of my best pals, Supriya Dwivedi, grew up in Montreal as well, born and raised. She had a lot to say about this yesterday on Twitter, and I want to let you know that Supriya and I, in tomorrow's episode of Seriously, are going to be hitting this story, plus zooming it out to the bigger picture, C-21, the bill, changes to gun legislation in Canada. You can check out that podcast at seriouslypod.com. We also make it available on YouTube, and we appreciate everybody that subscribes to that. That's Seriously. It's going to be coming out tomorrow. It comes out every Wednesday, a half hour or less. We cut through the noise of the stories that are making news across the country. We'll be looking to your comments on this. You can send your thoughts in to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Probably a good opportunity for some of you to get a trash talk off your chest. We read those every single Friday. Trash Talk is presented on this show by Local Environmental Services, operating in Alberta and Saskatchewan. This is a family-owned business for more than 25 years. Have been providing services across the prairies. That includes roll-off and front-load bins, residential, commercial, industrial, even agricultural hauling, water included, vacuum truck services, even temporary fencing and portable toilets. You can find out more at localenvironmental.ca. That's Local Environmental Services, proud presenters of Trash Talk since inception, right here on Real Talk. We also want to remind you about the McBain Camera holiday sale that's happening right now. If you're still looking for that perfect gift for the creator in your life and you want to give them the tools that they need to push out their best possible material, you can save up to $500 right now on a huge selection of Nikon lenses during McBain's holiday sale. For capturing the finest detail, consider picking up Nikon's Z105mm macro lens. This is an unbelievable lens, $100 off right now. Plus, you can save $200 off the ultimate real estate and architecture lens. Hey, are you maybe a realtor? Maybe you're a designer? The Nikon 14 to 24 millimeter, that f2.8 lens means it can shoot in low light. You're going to get striking imagery. Or, of course, the Nikon Z 100 to 400 millimeter lens, amazing versatility, a great wildlife lens, available at a great price, $350 off right now at McBain. You can check them out online at mcbaincamera.com to see a full list of Nikon cameras, lenses, and binoculars, all on sale for the holidays. And John, for those that are watching on YouTube, you mind giving us a nice big wide shot of this studio? This new studio of ours in the historic Mercer warehouse would not be here without the incredible team at Complete Care Restoration. We put our faith in them. After our designers were done with the plans, their team went to work and troubleshot and problem-solved their way through what wound up as a seamless and successful build. Now, typically, Complete Care Restoration is a full-service disaster restoration contractor, and what I want you to remember is worst-case scenario. If your family experiences fire, flood, some other act of God, as they call it, you have the choice of which disaster restoration contractor your insurance company works with. We encourage you, based on our personal experience, to ask by name for Complete Care Restoration. And you can check them out online at completecarerestoration.ca. Well, coming up in Montreal, tomorrow it kicks off, December 7th through the 19th. For a couple of weeks, Canada will play host to COP15. You're going to be going, hang on a second, I'm pretty savvy. I pay attention to the news. I know what's going on, and I'm pretty sure a COP conference just wrapped up in Egypt. You're right. COP27, of course, the UN Climate Change Conference. COP actually stands for the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, follows up with COP15. Now, it was supposed to happen in China a couple of years ago, but of course, as you know, there have been some interruptions to events due to the course of this pandemic, and so it's now been relocated to Montreal. It's where experts from around the world will be gathering to talk specifically about biodiversity. We wanted to check in with somebody who's got an informed perspective, not just on what's happening around the world, not just the initiatives across the country, but special expertise on our neck of the woods, so to speak. Tom Lynch Staunton is currently the regional VP for Alberta with the Nature Conservancy of Canada. But here's the deal. This guy has had dust and dirt on his boots from the moment that he was walking. He understands what's happening outside, so to speak. He grew up on and eventually managed a fourth-generation cattle ranch in southwest Alberta. He's also worked for the University of Alberta, the Canadian Cattle Association, Alberta Beef Producers. He's got a Bachelor in Business Administration and an MBA in Sustainability, and he continues his love of nature through his work as well as connecting to the outdoors whenever he can, skiing, hiking, biking, you name it. It's a pleasure to welcome Tom Lynch Staunton to the program. Thanks for making time for us this morning, Tom, and welcome to Real Talk.
Hey, thanks, Ryan, for having me. I'm pretty excited. I'm a big fan of the show, so really excited to be here.
Well, that means a lot. And if you know the show, you know that we always want to talk to people that have walked the walk. We want to talk to people that understand the issues. And you know what, Tom? I think when we pushed out your image this morning as part of our promotion, I thought, I wonder what people will think when we stack up cattleman and conservationist together. Because if I can say, for a lot of time, I think people have perceived the ag community as doing more harm than good when it comes to conservation. But then we take a look at a story like coal mining in the Eastern Slopes, and you look at who was making the most noise about that a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, and it was the cattlemen in the southern part of the province. How do you reconcile the two? What would you say to the audience to set the table for this chat?
Well, what's interesting, Ryan, is especially the cattle industry does get a bad rap for having environmental impacts, and there's no doubt, we as humans, as species, do have impacts on the environment, and some of them are negative, of course. But I would say, as a former rancher and growing up on the land and then being a land manager, that really solidifies in my mind how important environmental stewardship is to our own well-being. And I would say, this doesn't come out very often, but I would say cattle ranchers across Canada and across the prairies are probably some of the first stewards or secondary stewards of the land. And they realize that taking care of that land is directly beneficial to their own well-being and having a viable, sustainable business model in managing that grassland.
Oh, I know that you'll be able to dance with me here as we talk about, let's talk about Alberta, Western Canada. We can talk about the prairies. We can talk about biodiversity initiatives across the country. And then, of course, around the world. I oftentimes find that the environmental focused conversations, when we say, let's take a look at the entire globe, it's I won't say counterproductive, but it's difficult because obviously there are so many jurisdictions with so many stories at play. But I'm reading directly from the World Wildlife Fund's website here, WWF.ca, and they talk about biodiversity. They say it's the variety of life on Earth. Obviously the Convention on Biological Diversity, a multilateral treaty, to give our audience some background here, that was open for signature back in 1992, like 30 years ago, at the Earth Summit in Rio, ratified by every UN member of state, except for the U.S., by the way, with a goal of halting biodiversity loss by 2010. States the website, that goal was missed. And so, at COP in Japan in 2010, the world community agreed on a 10-year strategic plan that included these 20 different targets. And guess what? None of the targets were fully met. So it looks to me like loss after loss, falling short, failure. I hate to be the doomsday prophet. I hate to be the cynic, but what's your assessment with regards to why there hasn't been progress here if it's such a priority?
It's a really good question, Ryan. And, you're right. Unfortunately, we've missed many of those targets, and those targets have been very ambitious. Current targets, 30% of the world's natural landscape conserved or protected by 2030. And that is quite ambitious. I hope it's not too ambitious. I think, it's perhaps a matter of timing, willpower, funding, priorities. We just got into last couple of years a pandemic that threw things, for a loop for everybody. So it's really been, unfortunately, while we say that we need to make this happen, I think it's just been delayed, and there's been many factors involved. The good thing is that the conversation is still happening, and the conversation is ramping up, and that's why COP15 is such an important reassessment of the targets that we made, and then looking back and saying, okay, we were pretty ambitious. Can we still reinvigorate those targets, and what's it going to cost, and who's going to be involved? Because it can't just be us, Nature Conservancy of Canada. It's got to be a whole of society approach across Canada, and it's got to be everybody involved, because we can't do it by ourselves, and no one entity can do it by themselves. It's a really important conversation, and I think the good thing, the optimism that I have, is that people are talking about it. And if one good thing could come out of the COVID-19 pandemic, was that as we were holed up in our houses and sitting there, we realized how reconnection to nature was for all of us, I think. And you saw that impact. You saw how our public lands and parks got, pretty overrun with people. And we recognized, and I think it really came to the forefront, that, hey, we don't have a lot of nature left. And so we really got to figure out ways to conserve it the best we can.
We've had conversations over the couple of years that we've been doing this show, and not necessarily endeavoring to have conversations about biodiversity, but that's what they've wound up being, is reminders of what's happening. I remember talking to an ornithologist, I think he was out of New York City, talking about buildings and bird deaths, and it was actually a completely discouraging conversation, but a great eye-opener, and understanding more about the decline in bird populations. And then we've talked to some oceanographers and divers and remarkable National Geographic photographers. We talked to an expert about octopuses and understood more about marine life and the decline of some of those populations. We've talked about commercial fishing and the impact that that's having on our oceans. When you look around, your jurisdiction, as mentioned, with the NCC is Alberta. When you look at the prairies, when you take a look at Western Canada, in the context of biodiversity, what are the red flags you're seeing? What are some of the encouraging storylines you may be seeing? What are the stories that people need to know about?
I think one of the most important things for Albertans to realize, especially when we're talking about the prairie provinces and temperate grasslands. Temperate grasslands, as many people may not know, are one of the most endangered ecosystems in the world. And in Canada, all of our prairies are essentially that ecosystem of temperate grasslands. And unfortunately, we only have about 24% of those intact native grasslands left. And I think what our goal would be, as Nature Conservancy of Canada, but also with our partnerships, to try to conserve those remaining 24% of native grasslands, because once they're lost, very hard to recover and restore back into a native grassland prairie ecosystem.
Tom, what's the threat there? Is it development? Is it like farming? Is it tilling? What is it that's threatening the grasslands specifically?
Yeah, the number one threat, unfortunately, is cultivation and conversion through other development as well. But it really is a threat of cultivation. And it's a really tricky conversation to have, because we need food. We need annual cropping, and we need farming. But we also need to think about how we plan our landscape so that we can both conserve these really important ecosystems like the grasslands, but yet provide a sustainable food model. And that's why looping back to the first question of where I grew up on a cattle ranch, we can still get very good biodiversity and conservation outcomes, and yet still have a sustainable food production lifestyle through raising cattle, bison, sheep, other livestock. So you can have a sustainable use and still get very good biodiversity and conservation outcomes.
What are how significant are the tweaks or the changes that would have to occur? And you know what people always wonder, right? Is like, how does this impact me? That's what people want to know, whether we admit it or not. So when the Nature Conservancy of Canada, I was reading some releases that have been put out by the group, and obviously they're looking to get the country's attention on this, leading up to COP in Montreal that kicks off tomorrow. There's a lot of talk about a whole of society approach. Which leads me to believe that the message is something different than industry needs to figure it out or lawmakers need to figure it out, right?
Well, and it is a whole society approach. So we're trying to partner with pretty much any group of people, and whether it's public or private, to try to make conservation happen, including other land trusts. We've got some partnership projects with Ducks Unlimited Canada right now that we're working on in southern Alberta. So the real challenge here is getting everyone on board, and unfortunately, it costs a lot of money to be able to do this. So the way we work in conservation at NCC, we do it through habitat protection, and that's securement. And securement happens through either land is donated to us, or we purchase land with a donation component, or we also do conservation easements. And those conservation easements are worked with landowners, mainly ranchers again, who can still own the land, maintain, their ranching business, their ranching lifestyle, and yet we've protected the land so it won't be converted. But what it takes people like us, land trusts like us, it takes governments to have support, it takes society, individual and corporate donors. I mean, we live off of private donations to do this work.
Yeah, I was going to say, to be honest, it takes people that are loaded, right? That have like, to be frank, real talk, it takes people that have so much fucking money and land that they can just let it go, which I'm not being cynical. I'm being serious. Actually, that is what we need, and it's wonderful when people agree to do that, but the onus is on the individual that has the deep enough pockets or the resources to do it.
Well, in some degree, I mean, everybody can be involved, whether, any donation can happen. Yes, you can have a larger impact if you've got more to give. But a landowner, for example, can donate a partial interest in their land and get a tax receipt for that. That goes against, income that they make, which has a tax advantage for them. So it doesn't matter as much on the size. And yes, of course, we really want the people who have the money to be able to give, and the generosity, and of course, the shared value in having meaningful conservation happen because of that donation.
Absolutely.
But we also, we get a lot of support from governments. And what's really interesting in Alberta, I'm very lucky to be working in this province, is the government of Alberta has been probably the strongest out of any provincial government across Canada, the strongest support financially, as well as actively in terms of policy for conservation.
Can you give us an example? I mean, it's so hard for people that try to keep their eye on the legislature. They try to watch politics. Can you give us like a tangible example of maybe a provincially funded initiative or program that you went, there it is, that's what I'm talking about, that's the right track?
Absolutely. So the government of Alberta set up the Land Stewardship Fund, and the Land Stewardship Fund helps us fund a program called the Alberta Land Trust Grant Program. And that program funds approximately $10 million a year in conservation. But it's what that does for Nature Conservancy of Canada and other land trusts. It allows us to work with landowners primarily on conservation easements, and have that seed funding to attract private investment, Government of Canada investment, to essentially make conservation happen. And over the last 10 years, the government's invested just under $100 million in conservation through the land trusts, us as delivery partners, which has benefited not just conservation, but the ranching economy. It's allowed communities to thrive, to have these natural landscapes intact. It's as I said, brought in private investment from both individuals and corporations. And so that investment is integral to attracting a greater investment into conservation. And really, it's benefiting not just those people directly involved, but it's benefiting all of us, because one of our new slogans, when nature thrives, we thrive. And that's certainly true when we think about something like sustainable ranching, or just having these opportunities for us to experience nature through having nature available to experience.
Tom, we've had also some really fascinating conversations on the show. I think in particular of a couple on wildfire management using Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous traditions. How would you say over the years, and as we look now to 2020 into 2023, following some of the national conversations we've had, the grappling that we've done that started with, if I say the number 215, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Orange Shirt Day, more and more people are talking about, on the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation and everything else, what that means to us, how we are implementing some of the calls to action, etc. How much of a factor is reconciliation in biodiversity and environmental conservation in Canada, do you think? And what role are Indigenous people in Canada playing in these initiatives?
So for your first question, I think it's integral to how we do conservation from this day forward. We need to have partnerships with Indigenous peoples across Canada. And while we are a science-driven organization in terms of land management and biology and priority landscapes, there's a component missing, and that's traditional knowledge. And we need to be able to incorporate traditional knowledge into conservation and stewardship. We are just embarking on ourselves, NCC is a national organization in Alberta in particular, how we do Indigenous engagement and how we support Indigenous-led conservation. And it's going to be different for every Indigenous community that we work with, and we're just in the beginning stages of this, trying to build relationships and really find out what is meaningful for our Indigenous partners to how we do conservation, and that's everywhere from reconnection to the landscape through hunting, gathering, ceremony, and space, to perhaps partnerships on habitat protection and securement. So how we do that, it's going to be integral to what we do. It's the right thing to do, and we're just starting. We're trying to figure this out, and we're pretty excited about it. I think it's really, really important.
Tom, before I thank you for your time, is there any key point? I mean, we're on the eve of the conference, right? I mean, it kicks off tomorrow. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that as soon as this interview ends, you're going to go, I wish we would have touched on that? Anything we're going to leave on the table at risk of?
I'll just phone you back, Ryan.
Yeah, good stuff.
I think maybe what I want to leave people with is that while we're still experiencing biodiversity loss and nature loss, we do have this opportunity as a society to either stop it or even restore some of these key landscapes. We need to start thinking longer term beyond what our lives are and try to provide this opportunity for access to nature to the next generations that come after us. I heard a rancher say, we're just borrowing this land from the next generation. So can we leave it in as good or better condition for them so that they can continue? And I certainly hold that to my heart to try to think of how we can continue to do this, because as I said, everything we do, our existence, we forget. We've become a little bit disconnected from nature, and everything we rely on is based in our natural environment. And without nature, we will not survive. And that's the reality.
Tom Lynch Staunton, a conservationist, longtime cattleman as well, long family history there with the Nature Conservancy of Canada. You can check out natureconservancy.ca. You can give them a follow on Twitter by following the handles that we push out every morning in promotion from our official account at Real Talk RJ. Thanks for making time for us, my man. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Ryan.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Hey, I want to say I see in our live chat as well, one of our just phenomenal audience members. I had a chance to meet her in person earlier this year, Sharon Morin, who was in Egypt at COP27. Looks like she's telling us in the live chat right now. I love when this stuff happens live, Johnny. This is the best. She says she's going. And I had reached out to Sharon. This is a great reminder for me. I said, hey, we want to hear about your time in Egypt. So maybe what we'll do, Sharon, we'll do this off air, so to speak, but I'll get in touch with you and let's make sure we either talk to you while you're there in Montreal, or we'll get you to check in when you're back. She's going to be bringing a Métis perspective. It's always obviously, I like that Tom was using the word integral there when we talk about Indigenous perspectives. That's going to be a huge part of the conversation when we talk about biodiversity, when we talk about tradition on the land, when we talk about approaches to healing nature, right? I feel like I'm stating the obvious. Do we all agree on that? Right? I think we do. I hope we do. A lot of people I saw that Randy in our live chat was making good points. Randy says, hey, I find it interesting that capitalism got us into this mess like 200 years ago. And everybody's sort of now hoping that capitalism can get us out of this mess. Randy says it won't. Land back is for a reason. Leslie says, I haven't eaten meat in years. I feel a lot better without it. I'd rather see wild animals than cows, but that's just me. I know not everybody feels the same. That from Leslie. Neil says, I would hope that the multitude of Indigenous communities across the country, not only a stakeholder in this conversation, but in some ways leading the conversation. And if this is not true, why? That from Neil. Yeah, great and fair question. Yeah, I appreciate this. Tracy's brother-in-law involved in creating more wetlands and has been digitizing his operation for others to study. How cool is that? Man, we've got a really cool edition of The Leading Edge coming up.
I can't wait for that.
Presented by Leading Edge Physiotherapy. Yeah. Talk about digitization, talk about changing the game and making things accessible. And oh my gosh, this is such a cool story. Neil follows up and says, and what are we doing in the school curriculum to empower the next generation to execute a real plan when it comes to stewardship and conservation? I don't know why when I hear the word curriculum, my stomach just kind of sinks.
It's one of those words.
I want to have faith in the process of the curriculum redevelopment in our province. And of course, we recognize we have people tuning in from across the country right now that may find themselves in similar or different circumstances. Chris Clearfield, in just a second, we're going to talk about this bankruptcy of the FTX exchange. Have you been paying attention to this? It sent shockwaves through the crypto community, and it's got a lot of people trying to make sense of what the future looks like. And well, Chris has a zoomed out view on this. He takes a look at why systems fail. That's what his whole book is about. Meltdown, what plane crashes, oil spills, and dumb business decisions can teach us about how to succeed at work and at home. That's coming up in just a quick second. That conversation presented by Apex Automation, who invites you to check out their website, apexautomation.ca today. You can check out some of the partners that they're working with and some of the processes that they're involved in, including the burgeoning field of autonomous vehicles and machinery. I mean, this is the future, my friends, and the future is now. And that means that at potash mining in Saskatchewan, or all sorts of robotics operations across the country, across North America for that matter, pipelines, natural gas processing, material handling like overhead cranes, conveyor belts, Apex Automation is giving people back their time by automating the more mundane or dangerous tasks. And they're also put a huge priority on the team environment, which is why so many professional engineers are looking to Apex Automation for new opportunity. The best career move you make could be a move to Apex Automation. You can check them out online today. At Friesen Brothers, there's a couple of big things we want you paying attention to. Probably most significant for right now, if you're going to be entertaining over the holiday seasons, we're inviting all kids to help us find Jerome the Gnome a home for Christmas. That's right. He's moving around the store in the weeks leading up to the holidays, Johnny. Jerome the Gnome.
Jeez.
Jerome will roam. For your chance to win Jerome and his candy stash, kids, just fill out, there he is right there at Friesen.com. Just fill out an entry form at customer service saying where you saw Jerome the Gnome. And they're going to draw a winner for each of the 16 Friesen Brothers stores on December 21st. Check out Friesen.com/Jerome. And don't forget the Christmas dinner box, Christmas gift boxes as well, customizable, fully, all available. You can check out the details online from our friends at Friesen Brothers. all this talk about sustainability, you know which one of our partners, I mean, this is exactly what they do. Kubi Renewable Energy is providing solar energy solutions to power your life. It's cleaner, solar is, than fossil fuels. There's no debate there, right? Solar systems are a renovation that will increase the value of your home. They're going to pay for themselves. And by the way, you're also going to be able to cut back on your electricity cost and your reliance on energy companies and their unpredictable rates. You can learn more about what going green, going solar could look like, including a 0% interest loan from the federal government to get those panels up there today at kubienergy.ca. And of course, we also want to remind you what's happening at Grand Dog Essentials Quality Raw Food. This is what we feed our pets. This is what Moses and Monroe eat every single day. Can I say something that means more than that? I don't think so. This is what we feed our family members. Why? Because we've seen the health impact time and time again. Now, they've got some great blog entries there, and it can sort of help you make an informed decision on building a raw diet for your dog or even your cat. I'll give you a hint. Variety of protein is really important, and the team at Grand Dog is experts on how to make that happen, including if you're feeding a blended diet of kibble and raw. You can find all the details online, plus order the promo code REALTALK, 10% off your order, delivered to your door in Calgary, Edmonton, and Central Alberta at granddog.ca. Nice job by the Real Talk Studio Band on that one.
Jerome the Gnome.
Jerome the Gnome. Oh, man, this next story, I feel we're just like rolling in hot to an absolute disaster here. Described as, I think, a mix of like a plane crash and a bit of a Ponzi scheme by our next guest, who contributed to an opinion piece in the Globe just a short time ago. Chris Clearfield helps leaders use curiosity to change the way that their organizations work. So he's a coach, and he supports executive leaders in attending to social and technical aspects of their work to solve complex challenges. He's taken a look at and guided leaders at some of the world's most interesting companies like Etsy and Netflix and Microsoft. You might have heard of them. He's also the co-author of a book called MELTDOWN, which was named a best book of 2018 of the Financial Times. He's a graduate in physics and biochemistry from a small university on the eastern seaboard known as Harvard. And it's nice to see you back on the show, Chris. Thanks for making time for us.
Yeah, great to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, can you give us a perspective check? I mean, I'm using I don't think it's hyperbole, but I'm employing euphemisms to plane crashes and Ponzi schemes and disasters and collapses to describe what happened with this FTX crypto exchange, but like billions of dollars in a sense kind of were vaporized, right? Can you set the table for us for those that aren't 100% familiar with the story?
Yeah, well, so FTX was a crypto exchange run by a guy called Sam Bankman-Fried, who goes by SBF. Nice to have those acronyms in there. And, what was interesting about it is in many ways it was sort of, held out as the kind of stable, ethical crypto exchange, right? SBF was trying to get, regulators. He was trying to get regulated. He had cozy relationships with folks in Washington, donated a lot to the Democratic Party. And so in some sense, his whole business was this kind of play for legitimacy. But it turns out that behind the scenes, there was, this mix of kind of, we don't know exactly yet, but certainly disorganization, a lot of complexity, a lot of interrelationships between these different companies that he ran. Not only was there FTX, the exchange, but there was also a hedge fund that did a lot of trading on the exchange, which he founded and then kind of let go of direct control over. But, it was controlled by the person essentially working next to him. So the whole thing is kind of a mess. And I think as I started to follow this story along with others, what kind of dawned on me was that, this is not a new story, right? This is like Madoff. This is like the Enron bankruptcy. It is sort of a group of smart people that are on some spectrum of, floppiness to outright fraud. And that's for the kind of courts to decide where exactly they are. But really at the heart of this is this whole kind of complex ecosystem and this, this idea that what these people were doing and were trading and were loaning money based on it were these cryptocurrencies that are, essentially, yes, they have value, but also they're made up. So it's a weird market that has a lot of kind of ability to manipulate built into it.
So my assessment or my understanding of this will most certainly be in layperson's terms, okay? But my understanding of this is that so there was this possible merger, right? Some people I think saw it as inevitable with what was a rival crypto exchange called Binance at the time, right? And yep. as my understanding goes, when the Binance team had the opportunity to open up the books for FTX, the whole thing fell apart. Now, to dismiss this simply as a scam or a scheme seems a little bit simplistic, but what's your understanding of this, and what red flags should people have seen? Like when you talk about organizational meltdowns, where should this one have first become apparent now in retrospect?
Well, it's a good question. And I mean, what's interesting about it is how much coverage, how much journalist coverage that there was of this before the meltdown. And, SBF, like, the word puff piece, kind of comes up in the coverage retrospectives over and over and over again. So yes, you're right. When Binance came in and sort of opened the books up, what they saw was basically that there were a lot of liabilities not backed by any assets or not backed by nearly enough assets. And many of the assets that were backing them on paper were stakes in cryptocurrencies that actually weren't worth anything. So it's kind of like if we invented a Ryan coin and you gave me some Ryan coin and I loaned you a bunch of money, well, what's Ryan coin worth? But it turns out not that much. Ryan coin, of course, would be worth a lot, but
sure,
you know what I mean? This is sort of arbitrary. But I think when it comes to the red flags, what I think about is, not only were there billions of dollars of customer money coming into these organizations, but also billions of dollars of venture capital funding coming into these organizations. And that, to me, I think is something that many folks are surprised by, that this, these billions of dollars of venture capital money doesn't come with any kind of requirement to, even like have an accounting system, right? That to me is kind of, that like breaks my brain a little bit.
You write, and I mentioned, and our audience should, I think, just read your piece in its entirety. Globemail.com reads the headline, FTX crypto crisis like a plane crash and a Ponzi scheme. There's a lot we can learn from it. There's one line in particular that I think this audience needs to hear, and that is that the FTX implosion is an important story, even if you're not a crypto enthusiast. Because I know people that are so bullish, and by the way, Chris, none of them want to call it crypto, because none of my friends are big on crypto. Some of my friends are huge on Bitcoin, and they will say Bitcoin and crypto are completely different conversations, and no Bitcoin maximalist would ever use the word crypto. They only want to talk about Bitcoin. But then there are other people that go, this is not for me. I don't understand it. I don't invest in things I don't understand. It's way too volatile, and it is very volatile.
Right.
You can gain or lose 400% on your holding over the course of a few months. That's just a wild ride. But you say that this is important basically for everybody to understand. What's your argument?
Well, I think that what has happening here is this interconnection and the ability for these knock-on effects to happen so quickly. And that is not limited to the FTX story, right? That is the kind of story of our age, that as things get more complex, we start to kind of not be able to understand. If you're working on a system, whether it's a supply chain or an engineering system, or even a system around kind of how you hire and fire people at work, if you can't write it up on a whiteboard, right, then it's complex. That's kind of one simple definition. It's sort of too hard for any person to hold in their mind. And then, look, we're in this era where we don't have any buffers anymore. We don't have, kind of capitalism, sort of squeezes the buffers out of everything, right? We want things to be efficient and fast and all of these things. And so when you have this system that's complex and it doesn't have buffer, then these small errors can kind of propagate out. And really the only thing we can do is recognize when we're in a system like that, accept that, and then start to dig into it, right? Start to learn about it, start to be curious about it. Instead of saying, if you're somebody who's in a leadership position, kind of this is the way things are, and then expecting that that's how they are, you've got to flip that around. You've got to start to ask, like, the folks that work for you, what are you seeing? What's going well? What's not going well? Because if you can't get people to talk about these kind of leading indicators, the things that they see and sense are going wrong, then you really don't know, is your system working well or is it not working well?
You talk about the potential to redesign and simplify systems. And you're not just talking about finance, right?
Right.
I mean, you're talking generally speaking. So you write so that we can avoid producing endless sequels of the same kind of failure. And I want to wrap with this because you have, like, again, the cover of your book says it all. And I think it's fascinating because you're tying together all of these things that other people would suggest, people like me at first glance, have nothing to do with one another. Like a plane crash and an oil spill. I mean, what do those have in common? I guess systems failure is what you're going to tell us. But when it comes to addressing that sort of a thing and redesigning and simplifying systems writ large, what does that look like?
Well, yeah, I think it's about taking that idea kind of just one level deeper and recognizing that, when you look at like what was happening with the 737 MAX a couple of years ago, those plane crashes caused by these systems that kind of hid what was going on from the pilots in some sense. That's a facile way of putting it. But and then you look at something like the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, or even a kind of more minor incident like a pipeline leak or something like that. Like, part of what's happening is these systems are big and complex, and like we can't send somebody in to go take a look at what's going on. In Deepwater Horizon, you can't send somebody to the bottom of the ocean to like double check that things are okay. You have to rely on models and indirect indicators and all of these things. And so I think really the first step is just awareness, recognizing when the system that you're operating in is a complex system and is a system where you can't control it, and you don't even necessarily understand kind of in any kind of depth or detail what's going on in the different parts. You don't see these connections that may be happening kind of behind the scenes. And that was the case at FTX and Alameda, the hedge fund that they were associated with. They had these connections behind the scene. They have these connections throughout the industry. And again, that's why when I was kind of sort of experiencing this story along with everybody else, it was like, oh, this is just the same thing over again.
Do you hold any crypto?
No, I don't.
Would you ever?
I mean, I won't say I'd never hold it, but it's not something that is like, it's not an appealing. I feel like I come to this story as a kind of crypto outsider, but part of that's what gives me the ability to have this zoomed out perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we want to hear it from different perspectives. Like I like talking to people that are so bullish on it and trying to pick their brain and understand why. And I like talking to people that are adamantly against it, that would never touch it. And then I like talking to people like me that are like intrigued by it. I mean, if you read the white paper, that sort of like ushered in Bitcoin,
right?
It's a quick read. I think it's like 11 pages or something. People can read it. It's brilliant. I mean, it is.
Right.
And then you see things like Dogecoin and all the scams and the FTX collapse, and then you're like, ew, like it's all just a bunch of noise,
Yeah, and I think that's a fascinating way to put it, because there is a there, right? There is something there when it comes to Bitcoin. I mean, I have a friend who's just so deep into the mathematics of this stuff that I get lost after a couple minutes talking with him, but it's clear when it comes to Bitcoin, there's a there, right? And it's clear when it comes to some of these other cryptocurrencies. Ethereum has a huge ecosystem, and it is kind of a distributed computer. I mean, it's sort of a wild concept. But it's like the gold rush. Like, maybe that's a good analogy. Like, yes, there's something there, right? There's gold somewhere out there, and people will pay for it. But for most people, the experience of the gold rush is, a lot of work and kind of being exploited by the people that sort of own the system, right? And maybe that's a good analogy here.
Oh man, that's reminding me of cannabis investing. That's what that's reminding me of. I'm laughing so I don't cry, man. I was just talking.
Tell me about it.
Well, I was just talking to a buddy just the other day, and I mean, I can name some specific stocks. I mean, probably Aurora's the biggest one, but I know that there were people that were in at like pennies, and there were people that were in at 25 cents, and then there were people like me that were in. I bought at $2.67, bought at $2.67, and it shot up to $18. And why would you sell when you think it's going to 70? And so everybody was counting their money, but you know who got out was like all the big players and all the people that made a ton of dough on a stock like Aurora. A lot of times were the people that you thought would be there for the long ride, like the CFO and the CEO and all of these executives that pulled millions of dollars out. And quite frankly, in a lot of ways, and I'm not a stock expert and I'm not a finance expert, and this is just my assessment as a civilian speaking freely on my independent platform, they left a bunch of people holding the bag, and Aurora has been a total disaster. And it's always strange to me when you look at people that were in the leadership positions in that company, and people say, well, how did like Terry Booth make like tens or hundreds of millions of dollars on Aurora? And they go, well, like, oh yeah, he got out early. Well, that's kind of weird to hear about the CEO of the company that you invested in, that the reason that he was successful is because he got out early. That to me is just, I know that there have been a lot of people that, I mean, quite frankly, the legal cannabis story in Canada, it's within its first 5 years-ish. And like, it's been fascinating to see legal operators really having a tough time, you know, maintaining profit or achieving or maintaining profitability. I'm ranting now, I recognize.
But you have an independent platform. That's okay.
Sure. I mean, that's kind of why we're here. The retail side of legal cannabis has been an interesting one. Everybody was trying to get a lease agreement. Everybody was trying to get a license to operate, because you would think it would be a license to print money. I mean, who wouldn't have wanted to open a liquor store 3 years after Prohibition ended, right? But the gray and the black markets still thrive in cannabis. You know, I believe that people personally should target Joy Botanicals, which is a company that I have a private interest in, and I'm just abusing our platform now to advertise for them. We can't advertise cannabis. I'm just casually mentioning them. But there's great work being done in legal cannabis, Chris. But the fact of the matter is that the industry is really, really, like, let me just say, if you were to come upon a shipwreck, the person that had been treading water for like 3 days and was just about to drown, that would be the legal cannabis industry in Canada right now. And it's just a tough one for people to wrap their minds around.
Well, and I think there's something, you know, I love that you've made this analogy, because I think there's something, you know, when you think about crypto and when you read the story of FTX, and when you see the other exchanges and the other parts, you know, people that were originating crypto loans and all of these things. I mean, there was such kind of such a push of money into this space that I think, you know, anytime, it's like the subprime mortgage crisis, right? Anytime you get money pushing into a space, one of the things that happens is people start to take kind of more and more risks, right? And then they're kind of encouraged to take more risks, and the whole system is sort of pushing them to take more risks. And I think it was Chuck Prince at Citi who I might get this quote not quite right, but basically, you know, you got to keep dancing until the music stops. And the whole thing is you don't want to be the last person there when the music stops. And I mean, that's the story that you're describing, it sounds like.
Yeah. I'm just looking at Aurora stock. I don't even know why I'm doing this. It's like it's like when face. You get a bad
ritualistic.
Yeah, you get like a bad MRI and you just can't stop looking at the lump. That's what this feels like. So Aurora stock is down just 9% just today, trading at $1.70. But I'm not a stock guy, Chris. What's it called again? Where like you got to divide that by 10. I think they're trying to like make the stock look better. So it was like if you had 10 shares a couple of years ago.
They did a split or something.
Yeah, whatever you call it. So if you had like 10 shares, it became 1 share.
Oh, they did a reverse split. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So like, don't look at $1.70 and go, oh, Jespo bought in at $2.67 and now it's $1.70. No, it's like the equivalent is it's 17 cents
for you. Yeah,
it's 17 cents, and it was at $18. And my buddy's girlfriend, now his wife, she said, hey, because we made the agreement to all buy in together, and this is just me lamenting. This is just story time. Don't feel sorry for me.
It's great. I can hold
this
some space
is just story time. And it was like, you know, it was like at $18, and she's like, do you think we should sell? And I was like, no, don't sell. Like, no, it's going to like 60 or 70. Do not sell. And then she quietly sold, and she made all her money, and none of us did. And she's kept it classy ever since. She's kept it classy, but there's just that knowing smile on her face,
Yeah.
That's all right. Hey, sometimes
does she offer to pay for things? So I'll get this, right?
Yeah. We'll just remind her, hey, why don't you use your Aurora profits to buy lunch for all of us? Oh, I digress. Sometimes it feels good to get it off our chest, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, right.
You can learn more about what Chris does by checking out clearfieldgroup.com. He's got these really neat free Lead Curious open house opportunities for leaders interested in deepening their ability to solve their most complex challenges. You can find him on Twitter, and of course, make sure you check out his book. All of the information in the description of this episode on YouTube or the podcast. If you like what you've heard from Chris, smash that like button, my friend. We'll talk to you again sometime soon.
Hey, Ryan, thanks a lot. Great to be here.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to solicit sympathy here, John.
I didn't think you were.
No, I'm just like, this is just the facts. These are just the facts. Have I ever told you the Aurora story?
Many times.
This is wild.
Well, you told me parts and parts.
Did I tell you that Terry Booth, the CEO at the time, was in my radio studio sitting across from me, like right when it was going public?
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't give me cannabis because that would be illegal. But he, at the time, gave me a couple T-shirts and some lighters with the brand on it and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, he comes on and I do this interview about like, oh, it's like an Edmonton-based company and they've raised like, millions and millions and millions in capital and they're acquiring all these other companies and they're going to be Canada's biggest grower and all this. And I'm like, yeah, that's fascinating. That's interesting. That's fascinating. And then I don't know why that day I didn't go on my iTrade and buy some.
Yeah.
It was at like 25 cents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I didn't throw $100 at it or maybe 1,000. Like, I don't know. I didn't or 10,000. So anyway, like 6 months passes and I'm at an NHL hockey game and some friends of mine come up and they've got means. These friends have means. And she comes up to me, husband and wife, and she goes, can I give you a hug? And I said, what's up? She said, well, we just sold our Aurora stock today. And I go, oh. And she goes, yeah, we heard about it on your show. About 6 months. She goes, yeah, we bought it when we heard about it on your show. And I go, oh, yeah. And I go, how'd you do? And she goes, well, it was like 25 cents when we bought it. We sold it for like $267 or like $265, right around there. I go, 10X, not bad. I go, how much did you buy? She goes, 10 grand worth. And I go, ooh. That's nice. She motions to her husband. She goes, he bought 100 grand worth.
Oh my.
So I'm working that hockey game the whole time with a pit in my stomach. Like, what an idiot. And I'm like, I will not miss this boat again. And like so many people do, making mistakes in investing, including in real estate, when you've missed a boat and you vow you will never miss it again.
You double down the next time.
I doubled down and bought it and then saw it continue to rise. So I didn't care about missing the first boat because I was like, of course you look back and say, imagine. Like when it was like 8X, I was like, it would be 80X. But I digress. Let's not get greedy until now. Whoomp, collapse.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. Live and learn, man. A few bruises along the way,
Cannabis, Bitcoin, it's all these wonderful ideas like, giving power back to the people, especially with like Bitcoin and just cryptocurrency in general. Let's get free of the Fed. Let's control the economy.
Transfer right away. Help people in developing nations.
Yeah, the problem is exactly what our last guest said, is that it's incredibly complicated. And there's just so many risks that we're now seeing. Like Bitcoin was like, I have friends who, Forex traders, guys who were like trying to get me into Bitcoin. Not that I have a ton of money to put in Bitcoin, but I was just like, I don't know. And I love the idea too, but it's just.
Now on the flip side, for people that are big on this, that have read the white paper, that believe that Bitcoin in particular, and we were sponsored by a Bitcoin exchange. Through that time, like I always want full disclosure. I always want people to know. I was never telling people to buy Bitcoin. I was saying
we don't know shit about Bitcoin.
We don't know shit about it. If you are going to buy or sell it, we recommended that you bought or sold with them. Believe them to be credible. They're publicly traded, etc. No longer a sponsor of the show, but there was nothing wrong there. It was just the expiry of the contract. We speak freely about it, and my thing has always been: if you talk to people that truly do believe that the future of finance will involve or even be built around Bitcoin. I'm not saying it will. I'm not saying it won't.
Or some form of it.
They will argue right now that this is a phenomenal time to buy. It's the equivalent would be if you believe that a housing market that's in the doldrums will boom in 3 years, then you want to see prices as low as possible so you can snap up as many properties as you can. I realize I'm not talking about the majority of our situations where we're just out snapping up properties.
I don't think we are.
But you know what I'm saying?
Of course. But
if you're buying, you want the price low. If you're
like,
selling, you want it high.
The difference with homes is like you can gauge that. Like the population is growing. There's always going to be more homes.
Can you,
with
though?
Bitcoin, though, and crypto, like the Fed, the government's going to create their own cryptocurrency. They're working on it now. So like,
yeah, but the whole appeal of Bitcoin is that it's not government regulated.
Exactly. But that's also the scariest part.
Sure.
So
sure.
It's like it's double-edged sword.
I guarantee you that there are going to be real talkers that are listening to this. I know some of them by name, and they're going to hear this, and they're going to have strong thoughts and opinions on what we're talking about. They're probably, some of them, going to feel like we're missing the mark. Maybe me more than John.
I always miss the mark.
You can send us an email anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Listen, we endeavor to have informed conversations and candid conversations. Real life, real talk. Let us know what you think about what you're hearing here. Every Tuesday, our friends at Leading Edge Physiotherapy reiterate how important they believe innovation to be. It's why we celebrate community contributors, movers, shakers, inventors, innovators that are changing the game in the world around them. We call it The Leading Edge. And a special World Cup edition of The Leading Edge this week, of course, as billions of viewers around the world are tuning in to the biggest sporting event every 4 years on planet Earth. We introduce you to a new invention that is allowing those that are visually impaired to enjoy soccer, Australian football, rugby, and other sports played on the pitch. Now, the fervor, of course, of live sports is infectious, but for the millions of fans with visual impairments, it's nearly impossible to follow the action in real time. So this Irish tech startup called Field Division has created this tablet-like device that sits in users' laps, and it allows them to feel the ball's movement up and down the field with their fingertips. What? Yeah, it's amazing. It's an opportunity to feel the action like never before. They described it as a bit like a bit of a Ouija board. The cameras that are positioned around the pitch track the ball and relay its position to the device, which then vibrates to indicate things like slide tackles, as an example. There's also descriptive audio commentary integrated. They're testing prototypes with football, soccer clubs all around the world, and it's just been named one of Time Magazine's top inventions for 2022. For understanding the hurdles that stand in the way of sporting fans and leaping over those hurdles using technology, Field Division is in the spotlight in this week's edition of The Leading Edge, presented by our friends at Leading Edge Physiotherapy. Life shouldn't hurt. I was watching some videos about that invention, and there were so many soccer fans, Aussie rules football fans that were saying that they have sat in the stands for years, and people that are visually impaired or blind sat in the stands for years listening to the commentary on their headphones and feeling and obviously being privy to the vibrations of the stadium or understanding the cheers. But they've said, one fellow in particular, that it still felt like he was alienated from the rest of the crowd because he couldn't tell exactly where they were on the pitch. Sure. And he's been using one of these prototypes, and they have these videos, and you can check them out online. Just Google Field of Vision Tech, and you can see, the smile on this guy's face says it all as he's sort of experiencing his favorite sport in a way that he never has before. It's really cool. Fascinating stuff. Yeah. Super cool stuff.
I love it.
One of the players on this, there's in particular, there's out of Dublin, Ireland. It's called the Bohemian Football Club. One of their players, his sister, is visually impaired, and she was one of the first to receive this prototype, to be able to enjoy her brother playing and to be able to better understand where he is and how he's playing and how the game is going. And I just thought that was so cool.
Yeah. It was like our guest yesterday. We're all going to be visually impaired at some point.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Create all these machines so I can just be ahead at some point in my life.
Yeah.
Being wheeled around.
Brad Bartko that we talked to yesterday on the heels of International Day of Persons with
Incredible
Disabilities.
Guy.
Wasn't that guy unreal?
Yeah.
Like his passion is infectious.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just doing amazing work, smashing down barriers for people, and a lot of work still to be done. We appreciated that. If you missed that interview,
go back.
Make sure you check it out. Of course, we release the highlights every single day from our official Twitter account at Real Talk RJ. And the show, quite frankly, wouldn't happen without sponsors like our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. John, have you figured out all your stocking stuffers yet? Can I bail you out on something?
Can you not put me on the spot?
I know that there's a real appreciation for the dairy-free dilly bars in your house. Now you're going to say, well, I can't put those in a stocking. You know what goes perfectly in a stocking is a Dairy Queen gift card. Yeah, that's right. The Dairy Queen lover in your life can pick up whatever they like. The Buster Bar, the Dilly Bar, the Dairy-Free Dilly, the Blizzard, the Signature Stack Burger Combos, the Treats of Pizza, the Blizzard Cake, and more. There's nothing like a treat, hot or cold. Hot Eats, Cool Treats. From the Dairy Queens in Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. You walk into a Dairy Queen in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, or Baseline Road. You let them know Real Talk sent you, and you're there to pick up Dairy Queen gift cards, the perfect gift for whomever you're celebrating this holiday season.
I'm going to get you one.
I like that.
So you can have one of your dashboard burgers.
You like the dashboard?
Unboxing day.
You know what? I need to have an entire Instagram account simply dedicated to dashboard Dairy Queen burgers. It's just when I get them in the drive-thru, I have to photograph them because they're the only quick service spot where the burgers actually look like they look in the ads.
Yeah.
And all the other ones just, they're thrown together haphazard. And Dairy Queen, it's a masterpiece, baby. You know what else is a masterpiece, John? Front yards and backyards designed by our friends at Eden Landscaping. They bring outdoor spaces to life. You want to go, well, what does bringing a space to life look like? Why not check out the services, or better yet, the portfolio link on their website at landscapeedmonton.ca. You can check out featured projects like the one in Balmoral Heights. I love this one. It was included in a Greenland garden tour. It features, get this, can you imagine, 100,000 pounds of boulders? Unbelievable natural beauty and impact. You can check out the eye-catching design, how they used a pair of dry creek beds to add visual depth and as well to nourish the greenery at their banks. And they bottled it. This is like kind of like a stone step down to the fire pit type scenario, an alfresco dining area under a cedar pergola, a beautiful extension to the home itself. I mean, this is just one project I'm describing. You probably have your own ideas on what yours would look like. Mike would love to hear about them so we can get the design started. You can make contact with Eden Landscaping today at landscapeedmonton.ca. If you're like our family, you're taking a look at the money that's coming in every month and the money that's going out. And obviously, utilities are a big expense, especially through the winter months. It's a great time to visit parkpower.ca. Today, get off that regulated rate option that you might be on, a variable style rate, right? People are looking for ways to lock in at a rate that makes sense for them right now so they can navigate this uncertainty when it comes to where utilities are at right now. You can compare rates. You can sign up using the promo code 2022-RealTalk. They'll knock $70 off your first bill at parkpower.ca. And of course, at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge, a final reminder we want to make for you today. We understand, I've seen it. I was on the QE2 just last weekend. John, there were rigs in the ditch all over the place. You know, there were more big trucks in the ditch than there were cars. Isn't that the way that it goes? Yep. You know what I didn't see a lot of in the ditch? Now, I can't make you the guarantee, but I didn't see a lot of Jeeps in the ditch. It's North America's most trusted SUV for a reason. There's nothing that compares with the bang for buck factor of America's best-selling SUV. That's the Jeep Grand Cherokee. Of course, also in the Dodge lineup, there's the Durango, there's that beautiful Grand Wagoneer, and nobody has better selection than the teams at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. You can shop them online today or go see them in person. Let them know you're there because you heard about them on Real Talk. We know, of course, through the day today that most likely you and people that you love and care about will be focusing on the anniversary of that horrific mass shooting at École Polytechnique in Montreal back in 1989. We wanted to let you know that tomorrow, on Thursday's Real Talk, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Lise Gotell. She's a professor of women's and gender studies, and she's been involved in some of the national conversations, including some of the political policy development in Ottawa around C21. She's an advocate for victims of violence, and she's driving conversations about the roots of some of these things that we talk about, the things that wrench our guts, that break our hearts. We're going to get real with Dr. Lise Gotell right out of the gates on Wednesday's Real Talk. We'll see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.